we go. Just try a different button, see if it works. Good morning. Thank you for coming today to the, I think this must be the 6th Argo Workflows community meeting of 2020. And so this has changed a bit over time. We've started to do more stuff around Argo Events, and we'll be talking a bit more about that today. And this community meeting is really a great opportunity for people to find out what's coming up in Argo workflows, what we're working on today. Sometimes we have some demos from community users, which are always really interesting to find out what other people are doing. And actually, if you have a demo or something you want to show off, we always love to hear about that. We do this monthly on the 3rd Wednesday of each month. And for those of you who don't know what Argo workflows or Argo events are, they're part of a cloud-native ecosystem for scheduling and executing workflows. So by cloud-native, obviously, we mean Kubernetes. Myself, I'm Alex. I'm a principal engineer on Argo workflows, and previously I've worked on Argo CD as well. So I know the Argo software quite well from a technical standpoint. If you want to ask any questions during the meeting, obviously you can put your hand up in the chat, or we don't have hundreds of people in this meeting, so feel free to just ask the question. Typically, if you have a lot of questions or the questions take a long time or require a more detailed answer, then we might ask you to take it offline, or we might come back and speak to you directly. But that's fine, of course. And now a little bit about the agenda today. Derek has been doing a lot of kind of work on Argo events to make it easier to use, more robust, more reliable, and more secure. And he's going to give us a demo today of a new custom resource called Event Bus. And he'll be talking a bit about that. I'll be showing a few slides around some positive changes for Argo Workflows 3.0, so you can understand what kind of direction we're going. What kind of direction we're thinking of going in, not necessarily the direction we'll actually be going in, and to provide feedback and thoughts about, well, whether or not you think those ideas are interesting, or if you think other things are more important. And we've had a discussion topic requested about keeping the Java and Python SDKs up to date. I think, why? Is that right? I think you asked for this particular topic. So I'll probably let you lead this if that's amenable to you.
Yes,
and just
thank you.
Thank you. And one last thing here is please add your name. We love to know which companies are doing and working with Argo here. And so just add your name as an attendee here, and that will make Mukalika happy as well, because she likes to know who comes to the meetings. Okay, Derek, are you ready to take over?
Yes, thanks, Alex.
I will hand over to you now.
All right, thank you. Let me share my screen. All right, my name is Derek. I'm from Intuit. I work on both Argo Workflow and Argo Events. In last committee meeting, we introduced that we're working on some enhancement on Argo Events. And I also mentioned we're going to introduce a new CRD named the Event Bus, which will represent a pub subsystem. We're going to introduce the pub subsystem in the picture, and here in the middle, and then between the event source and the sensor, to make the system reliable, more reliable. And today I'm going to give a demo about the new event source CRD object. You can see my screen, right? Okay. So let's take a look at the event bus spec. This is the simplest event bus spec. You give a name, you give a, right now we support NATs, and we support a native NATs, which means we're gonna install a NAT service for you, or there's another field named exotic here, which means you can provide your own NAS configuration. So this is the simplest event bus configuration. And just give a native, and you can give an empty here, and then we'll create a NAS service for you. Today, I'm gonna give a one more field here named op. So this means that I'm gonna create the event bus with native NAS installation and then use a token as the auth strategy. Now I'm gonna apply it to my cluster. All right. So after I created this event bus, it will spin up a NAS streaming RESTful set with a minimal replica set 3. All right. So right now the 3 pods are running, and then I have a. Let's look at the. So first, let's look at the status of the event bus, and then it gives the config in the status. It gives it's NAS, and then it has access secret. It gives the key name and auth strategy token, and give the since it's not streaming, so it has cluster ID, and then this cluster ID we generated, and then just give it the URL. Right now, I'm gonna. I have a test pod here. This is a NAS test box, and then I'm gonna use the command line here to publish some messages to the NAS server, and then I use the subscriber client here to subscribe the messages. Just want to make sure the NAS service is working. Okay, so I'm gonna use the stan pub. Stan actually is the reverse side of a NAS, which means it's the NAS streaming, not NAS server. So NAS has 2 components: NAS server and NAS streaming. We're gonna use NAS streaming, which brings the persistent and history message features. So I use a stan pub, and I give a NAS -s means the NAS server URL, and then here, because we are using auth strategy, so I'm gonna get the token in the secret. So when we create the NAS stateful set, we also create 2 secrets. One is for the server configuration, another one is for the client. The client means the future sensor and event source pod to use to connect to NAS service. It's base 64 encoded, so I need to decode it to get. All right, so I get the token here, and then I'm going to use a token in the test box. And I also need to get the URL event bus service. Okay. And I need to give the cluster ID. All right. And then I'm going to publish the message to a channel named hello. I'm going to do 001. I also publish 02 and 3. All right. And then I'm going to subscribe to the channel named hello. So, and then I got all the 3 messages published. This is just to make sure the NAS service is working. And then in the future, so right now I'm working on to make change to the sensor and merging and gateway and event source. And in the future, in your NAS event source configuration, you don't need to give the subscriber as a in the subscription part in your event in your gateway, and the sensor part you don't need to give anything. Just by default, we're going to use a default event bus, and then all the message will go to the event bus, and then the sensor will read the message from event bus. This make it easier and more reliable. We can look at more specs about the event bus. So if you want to give more replicas, just give your number here. And if you want to make the anti-affinity, by default is false. If you give anti-affinity to true, and then just follow the rules anti-affinity to schedule path. And you also give a persistent. You give your storage class name, access mode, or volume size. By default, the volume size is 5 GB. This is for native NAS installation. And if you have an existing NAS streaming server installed somewhere, it also can give its configuration there, and then we'll connect to the existing NAS service. And we also need, in our roadmap, we will also support Kafka in the future, but we're not gonna create a native Kafka installation, but we're gonna just support, you give a Kafka configuration, and we use the Kafka. And here in the doc, you can get you can see the full specs and the sample specs here, and then right now we haven't integrated the event bus and sensor and event source, but we want to give a demo in advance to just want to get your feedback earlier to see if you have any comments on the specs. And then if you have any question, you can ping me on Slack or oh, sorry, do you have any question right now? If you don't have any question right now, but and you can ping me on Slack if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. Am I right in thinking this replaces all the gateway resources? Is that one of the things it does?
This replaced the subscriber part in the gateway spec. So right now, in the gateway spec, you need to give a subscriber. Let me share an example. So for example, this calendar gateway, you need to give a subscriber as a HTTP endpoint or give a NAS server here. And with the new event bus, you will not need to give this part. So all the message will, all the events will send to the event bus by default. And sensor just read the message from the event bus.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask Derek about this before we move on? Okay, no questions. Mukalika has made a request. If you're here, she's asked if you can add. If you're here as a first-time attendee, she would like to know if you are evaluating on using Argo events alongside Argo workflows. So if you want to add that to the community meeting document, that would be absolutely fantastic. Okay, I'm going to share some slides with you. Just these kind of reflect some of the discussions that we've been having in the core team around the kind of future of Argo workflows and where we might go next with it. You're probably aware it's changed probably quite a lot over the last 6 months or so, with the additions of features such as workflow templates, cron workflows, and obviously the persistence feature for offloading those statuses and workflow archives. And it's, in a way, we still run very much the same core software, but we've got a lot of newer components attached to it. And we're now looking forward to the future and what kind of lessons that we've learned from this process over the recent times. And we're looking really at what might be an Argo Workflows 3.0. And what I think we're after today is kind of just a bit of discussion. I'm kind of interested to see what people think about some of these ones. What are the impacts of them? And if there's actually anything you would particularly like to see in Argo Workflows 3.0, any kind of really big features that you think is currently missing from it. Let me just put a little V here, it's bugging me. There we Okay, so 3.0 probably hints to people that we would expect to make at least some breaking changes. Now, we really are trying to avoid breaking changes. We never make them for the sake of them. We always make them. We always try and avoid them if we can do. But sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we are maintaining a lot of existing code that we don't really need, we don't really use, and we want to get rid of it. And some of that would be the removal of kind of some of these deprecated fields in the configuration and specification that date back some time, such as configuration around the executor and around metrics and around templates, template arguments, and so forth. So these are some of the fields we would look at removing as part of that transition. I hope that's relatively straightforward and nobody has any questions about that. The second one is a bit more significant. So we would look at, we want to change the location of the GitHub repository. This is actually something we wanted to do for some time. Argo Workflows was the very first repository, and therefore that's why it's got the name Argo. And that actually causes quite a lot of confusion with Argo CD, Argo rollouts, and Argo events. And often people come to the wrong place when asking about Argo. So the plan would be to move it to a new repository called Argo Workflows. And that would result in changes to anybody who was using or working with that code base. I'm going to go through these much quicker than I expected, I think. Here we go. Another thing we want to do with Argo Workflows is have a tighter integration with Argo Events. So people often use Argo Events with Argo Workflows, and they want to be able to answer questions such as, why was my workflow triggered? What was the cause of that? And we don't really have a very clear linkage in Argo Workflows at the moment to that. And this is especially important if you're running thousands of different workflows on a daily basis with all sorts of different types of triggers. So the goal, one of the goals we would like to have is make it just a bit clearer why a workflow was executed. And this also ties in with the fact that Argo Events doesn't have any kind of user interface or, in fact, a CLI. Everything's done with kubectl. And this gives us an opportunity to build out some user interface features that would support Argo Events better, and also in a cohesive fashion in the same user interface as Argo Workflows. Probably the biggest potential item on this is multi-cluster, and multi-cluster invariably means multi-tenancy at the same time. So rather than having one user interface deployed into each cluster, we would have a single user interface that allows you to act as a overview and potentially a control plane for all your different clusters. And that really necessitates at that point kind of multi-tenancy at that point. So the current role we use for Argo Workflows is that we essentially have a service account. But if you've got multiple clusters, you probably have multiple teams. And if you're in an enterprise environment, then you almost certainly want to separate the data in such a way that one team can't access another team's data. So you need some kind of role-based access controls to do that. We have a relatively simple model today in the user interface. Either you can use an auth mode called server, which essentially means that Argo, it's an anonymous, unauthenticated login, and you just get whatever permissions the Argo server service account has, which you typically wouldn't want to put as anything above read-only. You can also use client-based auth, and you can use these both at the same time. And client-based auth is the one where you run Argo auth token and you paste that token into the user interface. And then effectively you're running with whatever permission that you have for Kubernetes. The challenge around that is we typically classify any user who's comfortable using the CLI as an advanced user, as opposed to somebody who is not comfortable in the CLI, who would be a what's the opposite? A beginner user or a new user. And this doesn't support those users particularly well, and it also makes it difficult to integrate Argo Events into other systems where you don't actually want to give your users any kind of command line access. So we introduced in v2.9 a single sign-on, and that allows you to connect to your single sign-on provider, which is would be an OIDC OAuth2 provider, and log in. And we're going to provide some additional RBAC-based controls. We're quite interested to see what people will want there. One thing I've not really talked about here is potentially a new code base. So you can run the Argo user interface now by running the Argo server commands, and it's built into that code base. But potentially we might want to move that to a new code base so that you can import shared code from both the Argo Events and Argo Workflows code base and operate in different ways. So that would be a breaking change, that therefore you would not have a user interface that would come with Argo Workflows by default. That would be a separate piece of software. Any questions so far on any of these topics that people want to ask, or any queries? I can never tell if no feedback is a good thing or a bad thing. It can be both.
There's one on the chat, Alex.
There's one on the chat. Oh, I can't. It's a very tiny little eye that's appeared in the corner of my screen. Let me open this up. So Daniel Herman is asking, with the move to 3.0, should we take the opportunity to make the repo compatible with Go modules, since you can't actually use Go Get? That's a very interesting question. The answer to that is yes. Yes, we would do that. There is a reason that we've not done that effectively so far, and it's because the Go modules system is quite opinionated about what V2 and V3 means. If you're on V0 or V1, then you just have a Git repository and you go get that Git repository. If you're on V2 or any other V3, V4, then what you have two options there. Either you create a subdirectory called V2, or you create a branch called V2. And as you can imagine, if you're using Git, all your tooling is based around repository paths and versions. And also all your automations are based around that. So it's actually extremely, it's basically impractical to migrate a module to V2. I don't, in my humble opinion, it's not a very good system. I don't know quite why they did it in such a difficult way, but that is the way that they did it. So as part of V3, we would use it as an opportunity to make it more compatible with Go modules. And that would make it easier to import the code base into your application. So there's another question. Jaya Balan has asked, you just mentioned SSO was implemented in the recent version. Does Argo support security matrix like in Jenkins? The short answer to that is no. It's so people obviously talk about SSO and you assume that it's going to come with some access controls, because SSO almost always comes with some kind of access controls. The SSO implementation doesn't come with any access controls. Because the implementation is actually separate from that. And we're still trying to understand what the right way to implement those access controls is. Argo CD has a sophisticated model based around projects. So it was built from the ground up to support multi-tenancy and multi-cluster. And we have a number of learnings from that. And it uses a piece of Go software called Casbin, which allows you to create access controls. But the pro and con of that, and we weighed up against using Kubernetes RBAC, is complexity. Casbin requires you to include in every line of your code some kind of check against your Casbin model to make sure that you're allowed to access or not access the thing that's been asked of you. So it makes it very difficult to do it. It's actually very hard to even abstract that away. And we looked into how you might be able to abstract that away. Whereas if we're just using the Kubernetes RBAC model, which we use kind of throughout our code base, it's very hard to make a mistake with that. And there's no work, essentially no work required, or very minimal work required to do that. So at the moment, we're looking about how we can do that ourselves, how we can solve our own problems, and how we can improve that. And we just thought that having SSO was an improvement over having nothing at all. That's quite a long question. So there's another question here from Daniel Herman. Again, this is not specifically a 3.0 request, but have we considered collaborating with the Tecton team? While Tecton is focused specifically on the CI use case, there's still undoubtedly a lot of overlap between two projects, maybe an orchestration engine project, similar to the Argo CD / Flux effort. So we do hear about people using Argo workflows for CI use cases that we don't strongly index on that, because the CI ecosystem is incredibly busy. I'm wondering, Mukalika, if you want to particularly address this question. I think this is something you've thought about a great deal. No is a fine answer.
So we do talk to Christy and team, Christy and Tecton product management team. Actually, a lot of overlap between. Okay, so even recently we met Christy Wilson, who's the maintainer of Tecton, and she again iterated that their focus is mainly on CI, whereas our focus is mainly on data and ML based workflows. Even before they started the Tecton project, actually Argo workflows existed that time, and we tried to build it together, but I think Google wanted to build a new project. So we are trying to work together, collaborate. We have integrations with Tecton around Argo CD, but you're right, it is two workflow engine, but they are specifically focusing on CI, and we are focusing more on ML and data, but of course Argo workflows can be used for CI use case as well. So actually this will help actually if in the meeting notes you can also add like you're using it for CI use case or others. We keep asking this question. We ran a survey and majority seems to be using it for data and ML, but I do see teams using it for CI as well. I know it was a long answer.
Love
but we
answer.
do. Daniel, I hope I answered the question. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so just going back.
Alex, I had a question. Are you going to create issues with all of these features of 3.0 and then people will vote on it? Or there are already issues and we just need to group them together?
I'm not really sure at the moment around that. That's a good question. This was just the very first testing of the water to see what people thought of these ideas and see if any hands were put up or any red flags were raised immediately. So I don't know. The answer is I don't know. Sorry, again, a long answer, but it could have just been I don't know. Okay, any more questions around version 3.0 of Argo workflows? No, okay. So we've just got one discussion topic today. I mean, you can always nominate other discussion topics if you want to, even now in the meeting. This has come up recently around the Java and Python SDKs and keeping SDKs in general up to date. And I think, Wan, if I spelled your names correctly, you wanted to table ask what the best way to do this was. Is that right?
Yes. So our use case is that we are trying to leverage the existing Python SDK, but currently there are a couple of issues with the existing version of it. First of all, it only supports Argo up to 2.5 RC 10 or something. And so if we want to use the latest Argo workflows, that won't work. And if we want to use the latest features, that won't work. So we'd like to see if it's possible to move the SDKs to the same repo as Argo workflows so that we can always auto-generate all the API specs and so on. So make sure it's always consistent with the Argo workflows. And this way we can also publish releases in the same schedule. So one thing that confuses me is that oftentimes I find it really hard to match the Python SDK version with the corresponding Argo workflows version. So because of those reasons, it's nearly unusable at this moment. So yeah, just want to bring up this discussion here and hope to hear more feedback from the maintainers and the community members.
So the Argo Python SDK is community maintained, which means that the core Argo team don't work on it, and that's to there are, you know, what we do is we publish an open API specification, Swagger specification, and that's there for people to consume, which would allow you to write an SDK in any language that can generate code from Swagger schemas, which is, you know, a very broad number of languages. I've got a comment here from Christian. I'll come back to your comment from Michael Crenshaw here. So he says that he builds one-off versions of the Java SDK, and he's going to look into building an automated system for the company's use. And he's hoping it'll reasonable to contribute back. I guess there's kind of an implicit ask here. Is anybody interested in helping maintain the Python SDK for the community?
Yeah, that our team from Ant Financial is definitely interested in maintaining. We are actually open source a Python DSL for a DSL project to the community soon. Hopefully, I can share the details soon. So that will depend on the Python SDK. So ideally, if it's something that can be maintained well, either from us or from other community members, it will be very beneficial to the community in the long run.
Okay, I guess maybe we can continue this conversation in the SDK's Slack channel about how we should evolve this going forward.
Sure, sounds good. But how would the decision making like is there like a who would call the final decision? Like, let's see if there's enough interest from the community that supports this idea. How would we move forward from this?
So the way that we typically support, the way that the core team typically supports community projects is we'll set you up with a repository with the appropriate access controls and access to kind of continuous integration. And we'll also kind of support promoting those projects as well, so people are aware of them and they can go and find out what resources they need to find. That's typically the way we do it. Probably quite a good example is the Argo Helm repository. So we have a repository of Helm charts that are maintained by a group of contributors. That repository is set up with CI that actually automatically releases those charts whenever a pull request is merged to master. And it also has a code owners file, so different people can own different parts of the code within that project. And we tend to get more involved in that when people have a change in their circumstances, which means that they no longer are able to maintain, to continue to be kind of maintainers of that project, and we then need to find other people to become maintainers, which happens, in people's life. People have
that's actually the exact issue of the existing Python SDK repo. Is that the maintainers not responsive right now. I know it's a difficult time at this moment, but if we really want to use it, and we better come up with a decision on, for example, whether we want to move this to Argo workflows in the same repo, so that it can be validated and checked by the existing CI and make sure everything works all the time.
Okay, so let's take this forward by trying to find more people who are interested in maintaining those SDKs and make that a job item that we can try and find, say, 3 people who are interested in each of the 2 SDKs.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Alex.
All right. So we've had another topic added to discussion topics here. I'm not sure who added it because they are logged in. Oh, Omar. Omar has added this, and he's asked, using Argo workflows in a more regularity flow, how do you peer review on workflows? How do you audit?
Yeah.
You're breaking up a bit on my audio. I don't know how you sound to other people.
So we're starting. Close the video. Maybe it will be better. Okay, just right now. So we're using Argo workflow, but we're now starting to think about using it with more developers using it. And we're starting to discuss with our internal security team about how can we do peer review on workflows, how the audit and the security are in Argo workflow. And we'll be happy to hear from the community if someone is doing peer review for workflows or something like that, especially if you are using it in some kind of GitOps way, here or in the Slack or.
Omar, are you taking advantage of workflow templates yet?
So we are very happy with the cluster workflow templates, and we will use it. We're very happy on the 2.9 feature that you can just use the template.
But like reference it to the workflow is nothing but a reference of the template. Is that the feature you're referring to?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to suggest that the first thing, if you weren't taking advantage of the template reference feature, that's like the first thing you could do from a auditing and security perspective. The next feature that's actually in development right now is right now you can submit a workflow, and it could be a fully defined workflow where you have a spec and templates and everything is defined in the workflow itself. Now you can reference a workflow and then just submit a reference. And then what's coming next is the ability to just lock down so that you can only reference templates, and the user who doesn't have, for example, the ability to create or modify templates could only submit references to templates. And that way, the templates could be controlled by, say, operators, and then the workflows are just submitting like instantiations of that workflow. And so that's one security enhancement, I would say, that is allows or prevents people from submitting arbitrary code, so to speak. That's something that's in development right now.
And I'm the one working on that feature. So if this sounded interesting to you, and then it sounded like something that you might want to use, please feel free to reach out to me.
That sounds like a great.
Awesome. Yeah, and you can definitely reach out to me, and then I can definitely we can discuss your use case, and I can take that into account because the feature is still currently developing.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I will reach out later.
But since you're already using templates, it sounds like you're already using template referencing. Yeah, I think if with that and then the new feature turned on, then all auditing actually is on the templates. You can control that centrally, and so then not be afraid of people submitting workflows, arbitrary workflows anymore.
So yeah, that is correct for arbitrary workflow. We still probably will need some edit or peer review for sending the parameters itself, so the workflow itself. But yeah, that will be a great security benefit to lock it down.
Mm-hmm.
This all kind of ties back into kind of learning more about what people need from kind of security and RBAC. So, workflows excels at executing workflows, but currently you do need to build more around that to get it to get what you need out of it. We do know some of the engineers here at Intuit, they use kind of a GitOps based model where users don't actually have the permissions to create or update workflows directly. It's done through a platform that they've built, and the platform uses GitOps for that. So GitOps provides a lot of that kind of audit trail and security for it.
So that sounds interesting, and if you can share it more, maybe privately, I will be happy.
Yeah, I'd have to speak to them to find out some more of that information, but fine.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Is there any other topics that people would like to discuss today? Okay, I've got one. I'm just looking in the chat here. So Jaya Balan has asked, general question on Argo workflows. I am totally new to this. We want to implement Argo as a replacement for Jenkins long-running jobs in our company. Long-running batch jobs, I mean jobs that run, it's quite a long question, run Python PHP scripts and run for 5 to 10 hours in Jenkins. A few jobs run for 20 plus hours. We want to provide HA and scalability in those jobs. Case-based solutions can help us achieve that. Can Argo be the home for these jobs? I understand that Argo was originally developed for ML data science tasks, and we have 2,000 such jobs in Jenkins we want to convert to Argo workflows. It's interesting to hear a lot of people talking about CI here, because I think, Jesse, obviously you were involved in the project originally, and CI was actually one of the key original use cases for it. And certainly, it's a generic workflow execution platform, and we do have some examples around running CI-based jobs, so it should be possible to use Argo workflows for that. I'm not clear what you're asking when you ask, we want to provide HA and scalability to these jobs. Do you think you could shed some more light on that?
Okay, this is Jay here. Hi, Alex. So we have a lot of jobs that are not actually CA jobs. They are just one-liner script that's going to be executed on the cron schedule. So it's like every day I'm going to run this script and it's going to take 5 or 10 hours for me. So we are targeting such jobs. Not all of them are CA jobs, or not all of them are using webhook from GitHub or something like that. So some of them are like dependencies, like they're waiting for Kafka consumer and so many other dependencies like that. And they're going to pull the latest PHP code from the repo, and it's going to execute that script. So that's how these jobs are. And
so okay, so is it just a single script that runs for 20
that's
hours?
single script that's going to take 10 hours, sometimes 5 hours,
so
more than that.
What I would say is, if that is your use case, then a workflow is actually no better than a Kubernetes job in circumstance, because you just think, and then it's as reliable and as HA as a Kubernetes job would be. Where workflows is more excels is actually if you were to split that single entry point, like long 20-hour script, into essentially like a chain reaction of like hundreds or dozens or of connected pods. Like maybe that script could do work in one pod, split fan out, and do some more work in like 100 parallel pods, and then fan back in, and then continue. If you were able to break that up, then workflows would be able to leverage your Kubernetes clusters essentially as a compute grid of nodes. And with respect to AHA and scalability, each individual pod is only as reliable as the underlying cluster. So I don't know if you're using EKS or like or preemptible instances in GKE, but if
we have both on-prem and GKE. Yeah.
Okay, so with like preemptible instances in GKE, they might just shut down nodes from underneath you, and so that's nothing that either Kubernetes jobs or workflows is going to prevent that from happening. But as long as the underlying platform remains up, like those pods will run. Workflows will ensure that the it doesn't it creates at most once, or at least actually it should be exactly once syntax or semantics, where if you create a pod, we will not try to, and let's say the controller crashes before persisting the say, it will actually try to, when it comes back up, it will try to create that same pod with the same name. And so in that respect, it's idempotent. And so it has exactly one semantics on the execution of the nodes in your workflow.
Okay. So the reason why we consider Argo was it provides a lot of features that Jenkins provides, like the Slack notification and the dependencies. Like after execution of one workflow, I can, based on the results, I can execute another workflow. But some of the things are not clear. Like in Jenkins, I can go to the UI and I can look at the console output lively, like what is happening in my script. And we have like 2,000 users in Jenkins, and we have 20 Jenkins cluster. So if you want to move to Argo, and we are targeting 2,000 jobs now, and let's say we are splitting it into 5 clusters with like 400 jobs each, and then I want to provide access to 1,000 users. So how am I going to handle that like, how can I handle that user management here? And also I would like to know how the console output works here in Argo, because Argo UI is kind of, it's still in the development stage, right?
For that level of scale, so as Alex alluded to earlier, so for example, we recently just implemented single sign-on to workflows, but the implementation of that is such that once someone gets past the single sign-on, they're actually just using the same auth that anyone got past that single sign-on with. So everyone is basically using the same service account. So we don't have the sophisticated RBAC that would be necessary to support something like 2,000 users, which might be members of different groups and different privileges. Really, I think the best way to think of it right now is just kind of Kubernetes RBAC, right? So if you are able to support 2,000 users using Kubernetes RBAC, workflows would be as good as that, if that makes sense.
Yep. Gotcha. Thank you.
It's probably worthwhile noting that it can be quite challenging getting CI right on any system, really. The biggest thing I've certainly found to make it easier to do is to ensure that your kind of CI jobs are kind of robust to being rerun. And this also kind of applies to Argo workflows as well. You know, they run fundamentally on an unreliable system, Kubernetes. You know, even if you're providing very large clusters and you've got pod disruption budgets, it is still possible for a step within your workflow to fail for things that are outside your control. So having you know, very long running pods as part of your workflow means that workflow will always risk having those pods being killed at some point during the process. And there's nothing worse than waiting 5 hours for a workflow to fail because of something unrelated to anything you do. And what kind of you might want to try is breaking down workflows into smaller, shorter steps, and making each of those steps kind of idempotent, i.e. if they've run before, they're kind of smart enough to know that they've run before by looking at the, you know, what output would have been created by that step, and then seeing if the output has already been created. And we've added a couple of examples of how you might think about going to that into the documentation as well. And anybody who's run a Jenkins job and got to, you know, a complex Jenkins job with many, many steps and has got to the end of it, you know, a 2-hour job, and then the last step fails because of a transient network issue, kind of knows that kind of pain, and then being able to kind of deal with that is always really helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, I did forget to mention the retry feature of workflow is actually pretty powerful in that, like, when you get to that same scenario where the last step of a workflow fails, when you retry a workflow, all of the preceding steps are not executed at all, and then only the last step is actually the one that is retried.
Okay. Any other topics that people would like to discuss today? I think we've got about 5 more minutes left to cover them off. Well, thank you very much for everybody who's come along today, and thank you for Derek and everybody else who's brought up a discussion topic they want to ask. If you've got any questions you want to ask, obviously come and find us in the Slack channel, or any feedback you want to provide. Also, if it's about the SDKs, come and find us in the SDKs channel on Slack and have a chat there. And I will give you 4 minutes back of your day. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you, guys.